Why generic rehab fails active and athletic people who already train regularly. That is the subject for this video. Now let's set the context up. You've got a shoulder pain problem. You train 4 or 5 times a week. You've tried the rehab. You did the 3 band exercises that someone printed off for you. And you might even have been patient, which for people whose identity is based in training and sport is probably one of the hardest things to do. But your shoulder still doesn't feel right. And I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound strange coming from someone who does this for a living. The advice that you were given probably wasn't wrong. It was just never written with you in mind. And stick around until the end because I'm going to show you exactly what the research does and doesn't say about all of this, including the bits that don't back me up, so that you can make up your own mind as to what you do next. Let's start by talking about what most people get right. And I mean this, there's really good evidence behind the general practice that is provided. For most people with a painful shoulder, you don't really need anything clever. The solution isn't a special exercise that targets one specific muscle. You need to load the shoulder, build it up gradually, stop being afraid of moving it, and that's pretty much it. And for a lot of people, that generally works really well. So when you hear a rehab professional say that it doesn't need to be complicated, just keep moving and loading it, they're not being lazy. For the average person walking through a high street clinic door, that's probably the right call. The lazy practitioners, however, are those that tell you to stop doing the thing that you actually want to do. Those are the people that you need to avoid. To make sense of this, we need to understand who the average person actually is. These are people that might not have trained properly in years, maybe ever. Perhaps it was a sunny Sunday afternoon, they decided to do some gardening, and taming that overgrown hedge was a huge spike in load for them, and now their shoulders hurting. For that person, any proper targeted loading through a structured rehabilitation intervention is brand new, and therefore it's going to follow the predictable process of physiological adaptation. Apply a progressive stimulus, the system will adapt, and then that person is going to get better. That's the fundamental basis of physical training. On the flip side, let's consider someone who lives an active life. Now, loading their shoulder is not a new thing because it's what they've been doing for years. So if we hand that person the same plan that you give to someone who's never trained and expect the same results, it makes logical sense that it's not going to work that well. These people are not the same. They don't have the same starting point. And that is something which doesn't often carry enough weight in the rehab decision-making process. And here's an uncomfortable truth that people don't often say out loud. The right strategy for an athletic person often can't be delivered anyway. Picture in your mind where rehab actually happens. It's often a treatment couch in a small room. Maybe there's a couple of light dumbbells and a resistance band in the corner. Perhaps there's a somewhat equipped gym, but they're often not particularly glamorous or well kitted out. For a lot of people who walk into those environments, that's maybe all that they need. It's exactly enough. But you're not going to rebuild a strong athlete's shoulder with an elastic band in a box room. The mismatch between the spaces where people who train spend their time and where the rehab industry typically delivers its practice is stark. And those practitioners will often talk about managing expectations in rehab. It's a common part of clinical practice. For me, what the space says is often shouting way louder than anything that comes out of their mouths. If I see nothing but a treatment couch, I'm expecting that I'm going to get to lie on it and someone is going to try and rub my shoulder better. Now, that is not an effective rehab strategy for an active and athletic shoulder injury. We do next to no hands-on treatment in our programs. A lot of physios are genuinely excellent at what their setting is built for. The problem is that their setting wasn't built for someone like you, perhaps. That's not a knock on them, it's a mismatch that the industry is only now recognizing and starting to address. And we're seeing more progression in the style of clinics which people are able to access. But working in those box rooms with ill-equipped gyms is one reason why the exercise prescription can feel off, and it's completely normal for somebody who knows training to get a strong sense that it's just not the right thing for them. And people talk to me about that all the time. So this is the part that I really want you to hear. You've been loading your shoulder for years, but you might not have been loading the patterns and positions that actually matter. You've probably been training around it, you've been avoiding the movements that bite a little bit, subconsciously you're offloading the work somewhere else, your body can get very good at protecting gaps, and therefore the gap never really gets trained. So it's not that loading failed you, it's that the loading that was needed has never actually happened. And you can't fix a weakness you've spent years working around if nobody's ever really measured it, assessed it, and then targeted it with a specific program. And that leads me quite nicely into this section of the video. So what's different about what we do? When people hear specialist and think that we do something exotic, well, we don't. We still load your shoulder broadly, lots of positions, lots of patterns. We build it as one connected athletic system and not a bag of small, isolated little muscles. So in that sense, yeah, it's general, but we're going to tick way more boxes than 3-band exercises ever will. And here's the difference. We place function as the ultimate outcome. Before we load anything, we find out what the actual gap is. The direction, the pattern, the position, the movement, what have you been protecting? And then we make sure that your program loads that at a level that is appropriate and challenging enough to matter for somebody who already has a good training background. Now, I've said this a lot recently, but in 20 years of working in the industry, what my philosophy is boiled down to is that I want to find out what you crap at and I want to train it. And it's as simple as that. So that's the whole thing, but it's not generic, but it is comprehensive. Broad enough to cover everything that matters and specific enough to hit the thing that's actually been holding you back. And now the confidence part, because this matters, especially when you've not had the results that you've been expecting before. Speaking from personal experience, you don't get your confidence back because someone tells you that you're fine. I've heard that years and years, over and over again when I dislocated my shoulder. It doesn't ever land. You only regain confidence by going back into the positions that you've been scared of with load and feeling that shoulder hold. You trust it because the shoulder's shown you that you can trust it, not because someone said that you could. And that's not at all separate from the strength work. It's actually the same work. The load is what rebuilds the belief. So if you've done the rehab and you are still stuck, I want you to ditch the story that says that you are broken, fragile, or that you're just going to have to live with it, or even that you should be avoiding it. That's the thing that kills me the most. You're not broken. You were just never tested and reconditioned properly. Nobody found the actual gap, and if they did, the environment might have restricted the prescription, so nobody ever loaded it properly. And that is a resolvable problem, and it's what we do week in, week out. If that sounds like your shoulder, you've trained a lot, you've done the rehab and it still isn't right, let's find the thing that got missed. You can take the first step with our free 2-minute shoulder assessment or book in a free consultation call so we can dig into your specific history. Now, like I said at the beginning, if you want the research, let's dig into that. Now, let me be straight with you, because this is where most people in my position would overcook it. And I would rather that you trusted me than to be impressed by some inflated claims. Let me go through what the research around this subject is actually saying. For your average person with a painful shoulder, the big research trials are clear, and I'm not arguing with them. The largest one, known as GRASP, took 700 and something patients and found that a single good advice session works just as well as a full 6-session exercise program. So more rehab isn't automatically better. But notice the word that we keep using, average. Every one of those patients came through an NHS clinic with a new recent shoulder problem, not a trained athlete with a years old one. Probably not people like you and the people that we see all the time. Secondly, does this type of exercise matter, specific versus general? Honestly, the evidence is pretty thin and a little bit messy. The best review that we've got found that more targeted exercise was probably slightly better than generic, but the researchers themselves admitted that they couldn't tell whether this was due to a specific exercise or just the fact that it was progressed and tailored to the person. The effects are small and the certainty around this is pretty low. So I'm not going to stand here and say that the science proves that specific beats general, because it doesn't, not cleanly anyway. Anyone who tells you that the science is settled here hasn't read it, and I think the principle of how we apply specific is much more about who you are rather than the type of exercise we choose. Thirdly, let me just dig in a little bit more on this average conversation because it's important. When we look at the studies, what we're often going to find is that it's covering general population. These are often deconditioned, sometimes primary care, new pain. Well, there's a review that came out this year that actually had to carve out athletes into their own group, precisely because, in their words, near enough, athletes load their shoulders differently and the general advice doesn't transfer to them, which is the whole point of what I've been making. The research isn't wrong, it just never studied people like us, those of us who train regularly. And here's the thing that often gets missed about why. Research and what we do in a reconditioning setting are answering two fairly different questions. A research study has to take hundreds of people, preferably, treat them all the same way, and then report what happens to the average of those people. But the whole point of what I do is the opposite of that. It's not treating you like the average. It's assessing, it's finding the gaps, it's adjusting a tailored training program week by week, and that, the individual bit, is the thing that actually makes it work. And you can't put that in a trial because it's individual, and therefore people are getting exposed to a different type of intervention. So the evidence is thin here, not because the method doesn't work, it's thin because the method is hard to study. The reconditioning approach sees the individual, the research projects and trials sees the average across hundreds of people. Now we need both, and we have to contextualize how we apply the information that we can get from applied practice and then from a research trial to package up something which is useful for any individual. So we can't wave a trial at you that says that this exact method is going to fix every train lifter, because that trial hasn't been done yet and it probably never will be. And what I can tell you is that everything that the good evidence does support, load it, progress it, tailor it to the person, rebuild confidence through movement, well, that's exactly what we do. We just do it for the person that the research hasn't included. And the gap where that research should be, well, we're trying to work on that ourselves with our own testing data and the studies that we're running through my role at Nottingham Trent University. We're trying to build the evidence and not just quote it. So if this resonates and you'd value a conversation, the links are in the description. I hope that the video proves to be a useful step in moving you to a better place.